remove the wheel, use a 19mm socket. Take the wheel off. We want to take this axle nut off. It's pinned over right here at where that slot is, so just take a punch and a hammer. Try to bend it back. Take a 36mm socket, remove the axle nut. Punch and just make sure the axle moves. You want to be careful tapping directly on the axle, especially if it's hard. You don't want to mushroom the end of it. Just take the cotter pin out for the lower ball joint because we want to take this nut off. So I'll just use some side cutters, bend it back, grab the cotter pin, slide it out. Take a 19mm socket, remove the nut. Now I'll take a 17mm wrench and a 17mm socket, remove this nut and bolt. Pull that out. There's many different front end tools you can use to separate the ball joint from the lower control arm. I'm gonna use this clamp style tool. There's other styles that clamp over that you can use, or even a pickle fork, but I'm not replacing the ball joint. So I don't want to ruin the ball joint boot, so we'll use this style. I'm just gonna put the nut on just so this doesn't slip out. Just slide this in position. There we go. So that popped. That's good. Just take that nut off. Take a long pry bar. Try to get this to separate. You can push up on the knuckle. Just watch your fingers while you're doing this. And get that out of the way. Pull that out. Just make sure you don't have too much tension on the brake hose. It looks pretty good. There's still some slack there. And watch out for the ABS wiring harness there. Now I'm going to take this fork off of the strut or the shock assembly. Use a 14mm socket. Take this bolt out. I'll just slide this down. You can slide it out of the way. Just make it easier. All right, use what you can to pry this out. Just going to use a pry bar and tap it with a hammer. There we go. It's coming. All right, that's out. Now just grab the axle and slide it up. Just take a little grease and just grease up the splines. Just make it easier to install. Take the new axle, just line it up. And you might have to twist it a little bit and just wiggle it back and forth. All right, lock it in place. You can grab it and just try to pull it out a little bit. If it doesn't come out, then you're probably locked in, which is good. I'll just take the nut off the end. Slide this fork back over the axle and slide the fork back in position. You can just slide the axle in a little bit. Put this bolt back through. Make sure you push the forks all the way up. And there is a slot at the top it's got to line up with, and tighten that bolt down. All right, now just get this all lined up. And there we go. It's lined up there. Get the forks to line up. Give that a tap. And take the bolt. Put the bolt through there, put the nut there. All right, now I'm going to torque this bolt up top of the fork to 36 foot-pounds. I'm going to use a wrench on the bolt and torque the nut to 47 foot-pounds. Install the nut on the lower ball joint. And I'm going to torque the lower ball joint nut to 60 foot-pounds. Now take a new cotter pin and line it through the hole. If the castle nut doesn't line up with the cotter pin, you can tighten it a little bit more to get it to line up. And take some cutters, bend this way, trim the excess. I'll just trim the excess right here. All right, take the axle nut, install the axle nut. Now I'm just going to take a pry bar, put it in between the lugs, and I'm going to torque this nut to 248 foot-pounds. Now that's a lot of torque, so be careful. Do the best you can. There we go. Just take a punch and a hammer. We just want to peen this down a little bit. That's just going to lock it so it doesn't loosen up. And that should be good. You don't have to go too far. And throw the wheel back on. Install the lug nuts. Now I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. That way the wheel gets tightened down evenly. And I'll just go around again, double check.